Shabbat Shalom. This is Rabbi Lisa Malik from Temple Beth in Aberdeen, New Jersey. This week begins the special cycle of 3 Haftarot that precede Tisha B'Av, known as Tlata de Puranuta, the 3 Haftarot of retribution. In the first of these Haftarot, God charged the prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, with the mission to warn the people of their impending doom, a doom that was brought about by their disloyalty to Hashem and immoral behavior. Yirmiyahu was so overcome by trepidation that God sought to reassure him, saying, Ve'ata ta'azor motnecha, so you gird up your loins, v'kamta v'dibarta alehem et kol asher anochi atzavecha. Arise and speak to them all that I command you. Al techat mipnehem. Do not break down and show fear before them, pen achidcha lifnehem, lest I break you before them. This message certainly seems like more of a threat than a message of encouragement to the prophet. This pasuk, this verse from this week's Haftarah, offered the Rambam, Maimonides, an opportunity to expound upon his philosophical understanding of prophecy. He explains that both courage and the ability to anticipate the future are natural faculties present in all people to varying extents and degrees. These qualities are especially pronounced in prophets, and in some prophets, true prophets, these qualities border on the unique, creating extraordinary individuals who have no need to be afraid because they know 100% that God is with them. Maimonides concluded that philosophical growth enables the true prophet to become especially attuned to reality and truth. Consequently, the prophet is fortified against those who threaten him with falsehood. Rabbi Mordechai Silverstein teaches that this prophetic tenacity is particularly important for those who, like Yirmiyahu, need to be reminded to stand firm when their convictions lead them to stand up for what is right, even when it is not popular, and to remember always that God stands with them. Just as the Haftarah portion features an individual who stood up for principles that were unpopular, so too does this week's Torah portion. Parashat Pinchas relates 2 compelling narratives that seem to have nothing to do with each other. Within the same parsha, the Torah tells the violent story of the religious zealot Pinchas, as well as the story about property transactions featuring the Daughters of Tzelophechad. We first encountered Pinchas at the end of last week's parsha, Parashat Balak. Bnei Yisrael were whoring after foreign gods as well as after foreign women. One Israelite, Zimri ben Salu, was particularly brazen. He decided to consort with a foreign woman in an act of public disobedience against God. So, Aharon's grandson Pinchas took a spear and pierced it through the bellies of Zimri and his Midianite lover Cozbi. Pinchas's vigilante act was motivated by jealousy, passion, and zeal on God's behalf. At the beginning of this week's parsha, God expressed approval of Pinchas's actions. God viewed Pinchas's murderous act as praiseworthy, and so God rewarded Pinchas with a brit shalom, a covenant of peace. God promised that the legacy of Pinchas and the rest of the Kohanim would last forever. Now later on in the same parsha, the Torah presents a very different type of scenario. Replacing the murder scene of the Pinchas narrative is a very tranquil, peaceful scene that involves a verbal interchange and a legal property transaction. Instead of a fearless, zealous vigilante, we encounter 5 shrewd, even-tempered businesswomen. In chapter 27 of the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, the Daughters of Tzelophechad approached Moshe because they felt it would be unjust if they could not inherit their deceased father's land. Bnot Tzelophechad wouldn't stand for this injustice, for their father's land not to be passed down to the next generation in their family just because they were girls and their father didn't have any male heirs. These women approached Moshe, Eleazar the Kohen, and all of the congregational chieftains in a public sacred space and proclaimed, Tana lanu achuzah, give us an inheritance in the land of Canaan, the promised land. So you see, in this parsha, we encounter two very different types of individuals. The clever, mild-mannered daughters of Tzelophechad and the angry, zealous, very physical son of Aharon HaKohen, Pinchas. Yet despite the apparent differences between Pinchas and Bnot Tzelophechad, there is a thematic linkage that may be forged between them. In commentaries on both of these biblical narratives, a reference is made to the same quote of Hillel from Pirkei Avot, where Hillel teaches, "B'makom she'ein anashim, hishtadel lihiyot ish." Literally, this phrase can be translated as, in a situation in which there aren't any men, try to be a man, man up. What Hillel seems to be saying is, when you are in a situation in which no one else is doing the right thing, you should try to do the right thing. The commentary Al HaTorah applies this quote to Pinchas. By killing the offenders Zimri and Cosby, Pinchas was making a public statement against assimilation and exogamy. When most of the people around him were praying to foreign gods and lusting after foreign women, Pinchas stood up against the majority and advocated obedience to God and commitment to religious observance. The Midrash Sifrei Zuta applies Hillel's quote from Pirkei Avot to the Daughters of Tzelophechad. Bnot Tzelophechad exemplified Hillel's quote by believing in Hashem's promises when most of the other members of their generation did not. Most of the other Israelites in that generation continually kvetched to Moshe and to God and expressed their desire to return to Egypt. They were so unappreciative of all that God had done to help them, and they doubted that God would ever bring them to the promised land. The humble request of Bnot Tzelophechad for a property inheritance in the land of Canaan reflected their abiding emunah, their belief and their faith in God, a faith that was not shared by the majority of Israelites in their generation. So while on the surface the narratives of Pinchas and the Daughters of Tzelophechad are very different from each other, both stories in this week's Parsha teach us the same valuable lesson. When you are in a situation in which no one else is doing the right thing, you should try to do the right thing. When the majority of people around us avoid appearing too Jewish and are not committed to the observance of halakha, to Jewish laws and minhagim, customs, it's our obligation to stand apart from the majority by proudly expressing our connection to God, to Judaism, and to Torah. When we are in situations in which others are not acting with menschlichkeit, we should stand apart from others and act like mensches. Of course, it's much easier to be a mensch, to believe in God or to do mitzvot when everyone around us is doing the same. Our challenge is to be able to stand up for God, Israel, Judaism, and Torah, and act in menschlich ways, even when others are not. Ken Yehi Ratzon.